I would have caught him in the second.
Good evening and welcome to the Planning Committee meeting of Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. And the full committee is here. So congratulations to us. We have time for public comment if there's anybody who's interested in being a public commenter. All right. Nobody's moving, so we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okie dokie. Consent calendar. Anybody want to pull an item?
I just want to make a comment on an item.
Okay.
It's the one about Hercules, but I don't really wish to, I don't know if we need to pull it or if we want to I'll just make the comment and then we'll go ahead and.
Why don't you just
approve
go
it.
ahead and make the comment and then we'll
Okay.
deal with it as a whole.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
So it has to do with the item about the Hercules checklist. And there's a discrepancy between what the Hercules housing report says and what the Hercules checklist says. And at WICTAC, we're working that out. So I just wanted to note that, in fact, that exists, and for the record, and then I do have the details here, if that could be.
Is it just an editorial?
No, it's more than that.
Then I think we need to pull it.
Pull it.
You pull it?
All right.
Okay.
We're pulling the item, so let's go back.
But we're not interested in seeing them have to wait on their money.
But we have to have the right number
Well,
in there.
yeah, yes.
They have to meet the requirements in order to do that. They
Um,
didn't have the numbers correct.
Okay, so
Well,
we have,
wait, if we could be a little loose with the rules, maybe it could be okay if we get to
Is
four.
staff aware of the problem?
Madam Chair, I would just suggest you pull the item so we could have a separate discussion and go ahead and approve consent first with that item pulled. You need a motion to pull it.
I'll move 1 and 3.
Second.
okay. I asked for it and you got it. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, now we're going to deal
All
with
right, one of us
item
can get away with
2.
anything.
So, Madam
Okay.
Chair, and if I
You wanna go ahead and-
Commissioner Abelson. So, the Hercules checklist, the staff is recommending findings of compliance. There is seems to be a bit of a discrepancy in the checklist between the number of housing units reported in this sub-regional transportation mitigation program. They have a fee program, and their report to HCD. And so we just want to note that the accounts are being reconciled. But as far as compliance with the growth management program, the City of Hercules is in compliance. They're in full participation on the sub-regional transportation mitigation program. They checked, yes, we are participating, and they're sending their funding over to WICTAC. It's just in some cases there are more houses, fewer houses, more money, less money, and so WICTAC is working with the city to reconcile those numbers. But authority staff doesn't see this as a compliance issue. We see it as an accounting issue, and there'll be a discussion over the next few weeks to reconcile it. But I believe we staff find them in compliance.
And I have a list of the details here if.
But they have to reconcile
If you want it.
My concern is I don't want to approve. I'll move to approve the checklist, but it says an allocation will be paid, and I don't think we should vote on anything about an allocation because we don't know what the allocation is. Can the allocation come back to us in December, or come on the planning? Or are we going to have a meeting on November 21st?
No, we're having one next week.
Oh, next week.
Yeah, we're having one next week. So it's kind of a quick schedule. The item is before you tonight. It would be approved by the authority a week from tonight on the 14th. The allocation of $396,099 would be, that's the allocation amount, and that's what the city would receive after the authority approves the funding. again, we don't see any compliance issues here. There's simply some accounting that needs to be
Are they
straightened
asking
out.
for more money, though?
No. The amount is a percentage of our local street and road funds based upon population and road miles. So the allocation of $396.99, that's a set amount,
I see.
and that won't change. And we wouldn't withhold that over an accounting reconciliation. And I should note further that in some cases, the report indicates that Hercules submitted more fee money than they should have, and in others less. So it's not as though anybody's
my
getting
concern.
shorted here, and that's a separate account. That is the
All right.
fee program for WICTAC.
So if we approve this, if you were so inclined, you could cut this check tomorrow and we'd be okay.
We would cut the check a couple of weeks after the 14th, and staff believes that the city's in compliance and the money should be allocated. It's simply an accounting issue, and it's not this money here. It's not this $396. It's the fee money that Hercules is collecting, $2,095 per unit, the number of housing units they've built, the reporting to WICTAC, and then the reporting to HCD, and those two things
I
don't
get
add
that.
up, and those are different reports, so it's
Yeah,
easy to
but-
have different numbers.
Am I hearing you correctly that they get X dollar per housing unit? Correct?
The city of Hercules is participating in the sub-area regional mitigation program, WICTAC, and WICTAC has agreed that all of its jurisdictions shall collect, I think it's $20.95 per dwelling unit,
But if
and Hercules is doing that.
Okay, but am I also correct in understanding that the number of housing units is, I'm going to say, in dispute?
I wouldn't call it a dispute. I would just say there's different numbers in different places, and
So
and
I have a
the
list of
report to the
those
state.
right here.
The report to the state is
Just-
kind of a
just-
clunky report, and the report on the STMP I think is more refined, and that's
Right.
just the lower.
the reporting on the fee that Hercules is collecting their fee is separate and distinct from what we're allocating today. It doesn't have anything to do with the
All right.
number that we are giving them tonight, correct?
That's why I
We're-
asked.
yeah, exactly,
If you
so-
cut the check tomorrow, we would be okay with the dollar that you're giving
The
them.
dollar amount is fine, yes.
All
Right, and it looks like the disagreement is between Hercules and Westcat.
WICTAC.
WICTAC, that's right, about that, WICTAC. So I'll move it.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
So do we want to enter this into
No.
the minutes somewhere, this document?
Why don't you leave it with staff in case they need to have
We-
an audit
Okay.
trail?
We have this in email.
Okay, you have the same email I have?
We have, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then don't leave it with them, they have it approved. Okay, now we're in the regular agenda items. What's the next, who's in charge? Martin?
Good evening, Madam Chair. So Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning, and here to present the first regular discussion item, which is approval of a letter that we've crafted to be sent to the city of San Ramon regarding some proposed actions or requested actions from a landowner that affect their urban limit line policy. So if we could get the PowerPoint up. So just by way of background, the Measure J Growth Management Program includes a urban limit line requirement, and that requirement states that by April 1st, 2009, each jurisdiction should continuously comply with an applicable voter-approved urban limit line, and it could be either a mutually agreed upon countywide line, so-called MAC ULL, a Contra Costa County voter-approved ULL, or a local voter-approved ULL. And just by way of background, when we originally crafted Measure J, we thought that we could come up with a MAC ULL, but we couldn't get all 19 cities in the county to agree to one line, so we had to actually amend the ordinance and allow for local jurisdictions to either adopt the county's ULL, Contra Costa County's ULL, or adopt their own local voter-approved ULL. So we actually have 3 cities that adopted their own ULL: San Ramon, Pittsburgh, and Antioch. And in this case, the ULL we're talking about tonight is the San Ramon ULL, which they refer to as an urban growth boundary. The compliance requirements are that the ULL is set by the voters. It's a stationary line. It doesn't move. The local jurisdictions are to abide by it by not annexing any lands outside of the ULL for urban uses. And actually, the compliance condition under Measure J is that if the jurisdiction submits for an annexation outside of the ULL, if they submit it to LAFCO, that they would be found out of compliance. Furthermore, they have to have this ULL in place and continuous throughout the compliance period. So we have a 2-year checklist. They have to have a ULL throughout those 2 years. We talk about compliance in the Growth Management Implementation Guide, and there's a description of a process for communications, and that is every year we send out a letter to all the jurisdictions called the Annual ULL Policy Advisory Letter. It actually goes out through this committee, and this committee approves transmitting it. And it says, if you have any questions about the ULL, if you're thinking about doing an annexation, if you have a landowner that's requesting an annexation, ask us, and we will reply. We'll send you an advisory letter as to whether we think that action or proposal will result in any kind of compliance issues. So local jurisdictions can ask for a letter at any time. A third party can ask for a letter, in fact. And then we prepare what's called an evaluation letter, and that's what's in your packet tonight. Is we've evaluated the proposal from that the city is being asked to do, and we prepared an evaluation letter, a draft for your review. And there's some more to the story, and that is, if the local jurisdiction continues along on its path, let's say if they went ahead and annexed, and we had said, no, it'd be a good idea not to annex, then we issue what's called a final notice of concern, which is kind of like the red flag saying, we said in our evaluation letter not to do this, and you're doing it, so we're very concerned. The criteria for assessing compliance assume there's a new development. Obviously, if the development is within the ULL, it's not an issue. Local jurisdictions can approve any such developments, and there's also annexations within the ULL, believe it or not, which are okay, because there's sometimes the jurisdiction's boundary doesn't match the ULL. So we also have a provision which comes from the county of annexations of 30 acres or less, provided they're non-sequential, non-continuous, don't create openings for future annexations. And that's really in there to help make corrections, because there are places where the urban limit line crosses through the middle of a parcel and so forth. And then there are a number of other requirements here that are all found in the county's urban limit line, and the cities have pretty much followed these requirements and adopted them into their urban growth boundary. So the city of San Ramon has a question, and I'd like to introduce staff from the city of San Ramon. Lauren Barr is here. And Lauren, I didn't get your title, I'm sorry.
Planning manager.
Planning manager for the city of San Ramon. Debbie Chamberlain's also in the audience.
Good
and Lauren is going to tell you about the request they've received. This is simply a site map of the approximate area of the proposed boundary adjustment.
Yeah, really, we actually have 3 questions that we're asking, and but it's a complicated piece of property, and so I'll kind of go through a little bit of history and talk about the site itself. Can I get the next slide, please? So the site is approximately 360 acres. It's outlined in red here. It's owned by the Laborers Pension Fund, and there's a training facility on the lower right corner that is operated by a group that provides the actual training to the members. It's not the pension fund themselves, but they lease it from the pension fund. And they've been looking at issues of ownership and needing to separate the ownership from the pension fund and the training group in a way to eliminate tax issues and ERISA issues with the federal government. So in terms of this, I'm going to probably point on your screen here. I know you're looking down here, but just to clarify, this is the training facility here. There's also 2 pads that are located up in these areas where they actually build walls, tear down walls, practice grading exercise, stormwater control, anything that a union laborer might need to do. Can I get the next slide, please? So it's a very complicated site from a jurisdictional standpoint. The yellow outline here shows the actual property boundary. It's on the west side of San Ramon. The county line is right here with Dublin below. And so what you're seeing is this orange line is the existing urban growth boundary for the city. The blue and black line is the city boundary as well as the utility boundaries. So what you have in the main training facility is a piece of property that has full urban services. It's zoned per the city standards, and it also has, like I said, it has utilities and everything you would expect from an urbanized piece of land, yet it's located outside our urban growth boundary. And this facility was developed in the 70s. It goes way back under the county jurisdiction. And so, as we mentioned here, we have our property line, or excuse me, our city boundary. And so half this site, or more than half the site, is actually located in the county jurisdiction. And so there's some coordination challenges that exist between the city and county standards. Can I get the next slide?
What's the green line? I'm sorry.
Go back. The green line is our west side specific plan. It's a planning boundary that goes all the way up to Crow Canyon area, and it's just it goes to the sphere of influence line. And it's what we envision the west side to look like regardless of jurisdiction. And so the first proposal that we're asking clarification on is we have an application filed for an urban growth boundary amendment, approximately 15 acres to encapsulate the training facility here. And it's consistent with our local policies for amendments to our urban growth boundary, and so we'll be moving that through our process. I would also add that there is a series of other discussions going on regarding conservation easements, future dedication of land that will come into play, but not at this time. Actually, could you go back one slide? I just wanted to point out a couple of other things. So this area right here, inside of the urban growth boundary, is a housing opportunity site for the city. There's 21 units programmed in by our general plan in this area, and so this is an asset for the laborers, the pension fund. In addition, our general plan designates this area as the Big Canyon priority conservation area, this ridgeline in here. And so we're talking with the property owner about a future dedication of that land associated with a future development that might occur here. And then lastly, we're talking with them regarding a conservation easement to be put in place on the upper portions of this property. And so that kind of led to the second question that we're asking. And so if we could skip 2 ahead. So as I mentioned, the property owner wants to split out the land into different ownerships. And so been in conversations about how they might accomplish that. And jurisdictionally, it's split between two boundaries. And so with discussions with the county, it was suggested that we might consider annexation to the city of land outside the urban growth boundary that is protected by conservation easements. So it could not be developed. So it meets the spirit and intent of what's there. And so that's what, while that sounds great, the language in Measure J and then the principles doesn't specifically say that. And from our perspective, I don't think they ever considered the option of annexing a protected land. What would be the point of doing that? But in this case, jurisdictionally, it simplifies what's going on in the property. So we took advantage of this process tonight for that purpose. And then the third question was really about who files a development application. If it was to be the applicant, or not development application, excuse me, an annexation application. If the applicant were to file with LAFCO directly, would we be in violation of our Measure J compliance? And that's our concern. We very much want to protect our Measure J status and maintain our funding sources. So again, we're after information tonight. So I think that's it.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you very much, Lauren.
Okay, you said the county suggested annexation. Is it county or LAFCO?
Well, we've had conversations with both the county and LAFCO. And the discussions with the county were basically, well, if you were to annex this, it would simplify everything because it would be under the city's jurisdiction and we can plan it as we see fit. So it was a joint discussion that happened several months ago. We have since met with LAFCO. LAFCO's position was that it may be possible to do an annexation with a strong enough conservation easement in place. However, they wanted to better understand the Measure J issues as well.
And I guess I'm thinking from the county's perspective, and I'm not sure why they would recommend that you annex it to the city when it's, as I understand it, the training facility is you're going through a separate process to annex that into the city.
It's already annexed.
It's already
Sorry,
annexed.
and
So basically, it's all open space.
right.
So why not just leave it alone?
Well, it comes down to how we process, well, it comes down to the ownership issue and them wanting to split out the ownership between these different groups.
I guess I'm not sure why that matters.
Well, it comes down to requirements for processing of permits between the county and how the city processes permits. One of the concerns of the property owner is under the county's discussions with the county, they wanted to reopen the use permit that's been in place for 25 years, or excuse me, 50 years now. And that's something that the laborers group does not want to do. And so they were looking at this as an option to simplify it.
Well, okay, and I guess and Supervisor Anderson must know more about this. Okay, if a use permit, if it's a conservation easement and no building is going to go on, why do they care about a use permit? I'm criticizing my own county staff, and I see Mr. Cunningham back there. Are you familiar with this at all, John? No, I didn't think so. Okay. I'm not going to oppose what San Ramon wants to do, but it just makes no sense that you have to go through all these hoops. I really is there a timing issue on this, Dave? Have you talked with Supervisor Anderson? I think that, and
Yeah, please.
Hi, my name's Doug Craw. I represent the Laborers Pension Fund, and we've been slugging this out for about 3.5 years now. So what you have before you is 360 acres, most of which is in the county, and we've approached the county on several different fronts, trying to do a fairly simplified, what they deemed as a subdivision. And we said, well, we're not really sure it's a subdivision because we're not doing anything. We're not putting a fence up. We're not putting a sign up.
are you talking about
We're not doing
the
anything.
potential?
The white, inside the white.
That's what I
55.
thought. Okay.
Right. And so nothing will change there. I'd be glad to give you a tour
I
show
believe
you,
you. I
show
believe
you
you.
how significant the topography is there, and it doesn't have a lot of great use. So we are, as the landowner, the tenant, the laborer's pension, the
Right, I get
tenant,
that
the
all.
training facility.
I've actually been
They-
out there. so-
Okay, they produce about 10,000 jobs a year out of there, nary a complaint. So I mean, I think they're a pretty good neighbor.
Well, I get that you've got legal issues between the government and you're trying to separate on all that. I just don't understand why that requires annexation. Not that I'm opposed to it, but into the city of San
Okay.
Ramon.
The reason it requires annexation is this county has frustrated us at every turn, no matter how small a parcel map and lot line adjustment, no effect on the county. They have come back and said, you will do full CEQA on this thing. You'll spend $1 million.
Well, and I'm not going to agree. I mean, I don't represent that district.
Right.
But we're going to.
And it was not my call, it was certainly the laborer's call
Sure.
to say, well, we want to spend $1 million. I said, well, I need to caution you that if you spend $1 million counting every tree and every bug, you may still not get approved. And as it turned out, a year later, the county came back and said, well, if you do all this stuff, when you do file for your map and you've done all the things we've asked you to do, that's a ridiculous route they've sent us down, you will may not get approved.
Okay, so when Lauren was talking and I asked the question if you met with Supervisor Anderson, I thought I saw you shake your head yes.
I met with her chief aide, Gail Israel,
And when did you meet with her?
a couple months ago.
And do they understand, who are you working with at the county relative to, I don't want to create a problem for you, and if you're having a problem with county staff and it's easier to go to San Ramon, I don't have a problem with
I'm
that.
walking on eggshells with the county. Trust me, I don't want to upset anybody.
Who
And
are you working with?
Jennifer Cruz would probably be our lead person there.
Okay, well, again, I don't want to, what did did Gail tell you? Just thanks for
They
coming.
were all in. They were all in. Jen Kwolek and Gail, both, Jen actually initiated the meeting for me. They were okay with it. She thought this was a good idea. Let's be done with it. Cleans up the whole west side over there. It's certainly my intent, that 176.8 acre piece. Mr. Hudson and I have been in a meeting on this before, as he calls it the grand bargain. I've offered everything I can offer
No,
before.
Sir, I
coming
feel
for
bad that you've
residential.
had these experiences. I'm just
No.
appalled. No, it's ridiculous that but and I know the major issue is how San Ramon deals with Measure J funding. It's just too bad because I would have, and this isn't a criticism of Supervisor Anderson if you just met with her recently, but if she had been involved earlier, maybe you wouldn't have had to go through all these hoops and you could be done with it. But
It's a little unorthodox, the route that we're now taking. We felt, a year and a half ago, it would have been better to do, we had put a plan together with city engineering staff, create some parcels, legal parcels in the city, and then do lot line adjustments into the county, and the county was having nothing to do with lot line adjustments.
It's ridiculous. I don't understand all that. So that white area would now be contiguous with the boundary of the city of San Ramon, and it would go into the city of San Ramon.
Not quite.
Yeah, that's my other concern. Is it leapfrogging?
No, I don't think we're, well, are you saying before or after annexation?
After annexation.
After annexation, everything's in the city.
That's my question.
Yeah, the 176, the 55, and the 128.
Well, I'm not going to get in the middle. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And Mr. Hudson, I'm going to let you take the lead on this, but this doesn't sound right.
Am I cut in front of
Oh,
Jen?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, if I may. When I first heard about this, it's like, you got to be kidding me. I've been after big canyons, what we call it, from before I'd ever gone to any committee, council, before the city was a city. I had known about this and think it's the best kept secret in Contra Costa County. It's that great of a trail. And when it was proposed, it was like, okay, where's the downside? Well, the downside is that we did not consider this when we were doing urban limit lines, that if you brought something in, deed restricted, conservation easement from now until eternity, that you're going to lose your money. So the next thing is I go, well, how do we do this? So I've been down here a couple times trying to find any imaginable way to get this. And I keep thinking, if we had enough time, I'd say throw this thing on the ballot right now. I swear I can see no way that people wouldn't vote for this to get it. Of course, I thought that at our policy committee meeting when the mayor was trying to say, well, I want you to build a trailhead. And no, it's a conservation easement. We have other policies. Then I start thinking, okay, if we don't have enough time, what would be the position? Boy, this one's going to be out there a little bit, so Debbie, don't fall asleep. What if we annexed it into a GAD, even on a temporary basis, so that we have time to get this darn thing on the ballot? I mean, have we thought about it? Is that a dead no? Because that's not in this. We have stuff in our GAD outside the city limits. Silva property, I believe. I mean, is that a possibility till at least we can get it on the ballot? While you're writing up your letter, check that out too. But I don't think anybody on this board would be concerned if this had every conservation easement, deed restriction or whatever. And I know that's what he wants to do. I mean, I was out passing out flyers and ran into him. Yeah, it's, well, it's the same thing. Everybody's afraid of the unintended consequence. See, I tried to say, what the heck, let's just do it. And then when we put it on the ballot, they'll vote to do it, and we'll get our money back. And that's where I was reminded, no, you won't. Not if you fly it right in the face of the rules. You'll lose the millions, period. It isn't something that just goes into a standby and you'll get it back later once you get back into conformance. So to me, and if we can't do it any other way but a ballot, I'd say how fast can we get this thing on a ballot? And I intend to bring it up at the fastest meeting I can get it would be January in the retreat. But in looking at this thing now, I mean, if there's any way to get it at next Tuesday, whatever it takes. I can't imagine anybody'd vote against this. You'd have to be really brain dead to say, no, I don't want this land free. But is that what we're hearing, Martin? There's no other way as of right now, or has anybody tried the GAD thing?
Well, Commissioner Hudson, if I may, I could give you staff's recommendation on this.
Yeah, I'm afraid I know it.
So it's written up in the board letter. So there are two parts to this request. One is this small area outlined in yellow and white, which I believe is 15 acres, approximately 15 acres. And Measure J urban limit line policy allows for the city of San Ramon to modify their urban growth boundary without going back to a vote for anything that's 30 acres or less. And there's a bunch of conditions on that, but this seems to meet all of those conditions. It's not creating any pockets. They haven't done a bunch of little annexations around here before. It's not continuous with some other proposed annexation. So the short answer to the 15 acres question is yes. And then the bigger area, which is 300 plus acres, and as the gentleman mentioned, I think it involves all of these little white numbers here for 300 plus acres. So that's obviously much bigger than 30 acres. And so Measure J does not allow for any annexations greater or any movement of the line greater than 30 acres. So this exceeds that by an order of magnitude. And then the other part of the discussion is, well, there would be a conservation easement over this land in perpetuity, and Measure J is silent on that. We don't recognize conservation easements, and we would really have to bring in the attorneys if you wanted to start talking about whether or not a conservation easement is applicable to the city of San Ramon or applicable to the authority, and how we keep track of that. And then the other question was, what about if the landowner proposes the annexation? And we did address that in policy discussions through Measure J in the past, and the authority has on the record that if a third party proposes an annexation, that by virtue of that annexation, that is not create a compliance issue for the city. But if the city starts to take pre-annexation actions, such as setting up a tax sharing plan with the county, then that constitutes facilitation of the proposal. And so anybody can propose an annexation, but as long as the city doesn't start facilitating that annexation, then they remain in compliance with the growth management program. So that is all documented in the staff report and in our draft letter, and we're asking the planning committee tonight to forward this draft letter to the authority for approval, and then it would be transmitted back to the city of San Ramon as our policy advisory letter.
Are you telling me that, forget this project, any landowner outside the urban limit line, if they propose annexation into City X and the city wants it, that doesn't fall within the 30 acres under the urban limit line, and it's more than 30 acres, let's say, but if the developer proposes the annexation, then it doesn't matter?
If a third party proposes an annexation, the city doesn't have any control over that, basically. So the city has not facilitated that annexation.
I see. So back to
It's
this.
not until they facilitate. Not until, okay, good thing.
Okay,
Lawrence here. He wants to
I
speak.
got to understand, between the black line on the right, and I know it doesn't go all the way up the tree line, but let's just say that ridge of trees on the right, up to the white line of the trees in the middle, is that already the city of San Ramon? No. So that's unincorporated. So that goes back to, I don't know how you can do an annexation. Oh, I see, because it connects down with there. Okay.
This is the current city line roughly.
There you
here.
are.
This area is in the county. Just to be clear, we're not proposing expanding the urban growth boundary beyond the 15 acres for the urbanized area that exists.
You just want to annex the other end so that you
as
don't.
protected open space.
And I get that. Are those a number of parcels? Is that why the county's giving you a hard time when
No,
you
it-
mention lot lines?
It's one parcel as it exists. This line here is a reference. It has two APN numbers because one's in the city, one's in the county.
I see, okay.
But according to their record, the county's records, it is one parcel. It's a legacy piece from when the Gateway Shopping Center and these houses were developed years ago.
I mean, I'm going to support it because, like you say, there's no downside. I'm just really sorry that you've had this experience with some members of county staff. We have other members, someone in the audience who's fabulous, that you're having to jump through all these hoops. And I'm still going to talk to Candace and find out why we can't simplify this for all you and just not have to pay your annexation fees, not have to do any of that, and just do what you need to do. But anyway, Dave, I guess it's your motion.
Janet,
I have a question. I don't know what the urgency is, but couldn't there be a follow-up on what you just said, Karen? And find out why it couldn't just be taken care of by county staff?
Well, I don't want to hold stuff up.
I mean, forward in the letter, just, I mean,
Might be
doesn't-
faster.
that's just a fact. I mean, you could still process on that same line. All we're doing is telling staff to formalize the letter and send it to San Ramon.
And-
I mean, it doesn't do anything that won't slow up. If we decide to go another route, it won't stop us. It won't hinder us. It won't do anything. All we're doing
I'm just
is.
asking a question.
No, I'll still
Yeah,
follow
I'm just
up.
trying to answer.
I'm happy to follow up with.
We can do that.
I just feel there's information that we're not aware of
Excuse me.
that why her staff has said just go ahead and do this. So I don't want to interfere. So I would agree with Dave that we should send the letter, forward it on to the full authority, and I'll just ask and see what I can find out. And I want to try and make it as simple and as inexpensive for you as possible.
And Dave seconds that.
In response to what I was saying, does that mean that there'll be some response back to us about whatever comment this county has on it?
out and report back, but in the meantime, the city can respond. I'll report back, but through staff. But in the meantime, that doesn't slow the city and the applicant up, and they can respond to the letter. I hope to have a response, figure out what's going on before a lot of more time is expended. But I'm just continue to shake my head.
It's actually the full board, right, that would do that, not this committee, right?
No, that's what we're doing. The full.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. There is a motion before the panel and a second. Ready for a vote? All those in favor? Aye. All unanimously approved. All right, next item is appoint one board member and one alternative. And Terry, on your.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. So tonight we bring a routine action item that hasn't come before you since 2012 when the San Joaquin JPA was formed. In December of 2012, we appointed Commissioner Don Tatson to serve as our board member to the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority Board, and we also appointed Commissioner Glover to serve at the time as the alternate. Since then, Tatson has served on the board for 6 years. He has represented the authority and taken on a key leadership role. Currently serving as the vice chair, he has been tirelessly advocating for improvements in Contra Costa and has been thoroughly engaged for the 6 years that he served on the committee. But at this time, as his term is going to be ending on the Lafayette City Council and as a commissioner alternate on this board, on December 10th, he'll no longer be able to serve on that board. So tonight we're looking for an appointment for a board member as well as an appointment for an alternate board member. The San Joaquin Intercity Passenger Rail Service has stops in Contra Costa, in Antioch, Martinez, and Richmond, and the benefits of the authority having representation on the board includes the opportunity to advocate for service improvements at both the state and federal level and advocate for expansions, including additional stops in our county, overall performance reviews, and the ability to gauge those who live in the county and use the services. So tonight, staff's recommendation is to, again, appoint a board member and an alternate board member. The committee does meet bi-monthly, and it does meet in alternate locations on the San Joaquin corridor. So with that, I'll open up for discussion and take any questions that you may have.
All right, may I short circuit this and ask if there is any nomination?
Well, I'll nominate Kevin Romick with one correction. I think I was the first alternate. For the last 6 years, I thought I was the alternate. I don't know how federal snuck in there on me, but I know originally when we set up, I go, boy, that Don hits every meeting. I never get a call. But I would like to nominate Kevin.
I would second that.
Okay, and are you willing to serve?
Yes.
Already. So we have a nomination and a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now we need to search out an
And I'll nominate Dave Hudson as the alternate.
Okay, and you're willing to serve?
And I'll even give you my phone number so you can call when you're not going to be there.
Okay, well, we've done all the motioning and the seconding. All those in favor? Aye. I think we've done our job. Next item, please.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next item is a briefing to you on what's going on in San Francisco at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association of Bay Area Governments regarding the housing crisis. And to kick off this item, I'd like to roll a short 5-minute video for you that is found on the MTC website. It's all about CASA. And CASA is it's a committee, but the acronym does not stand for anything. It's the Committee to House the Bay Region.
Area has a housing crisis. Some experts say a housing catastrophe. The Bay Area may have the worst housing affordability in the nation. which
Is that a
has
full
created
screen?
financial hardship for families and seniors, gentrification, and displacement. The lack of housing affordability means people are moving far away and then commuting back to work every day, creating ever-worsening traffic gridlock. As bad as traffic is, projections say it's going to be worse, with an additional 1 million cars on the road in the next 20 years. The solution is housing, producing more of it, preserving it in the few places where it is affordable, and protecting long-time residents from housing instability and displacement. Experts call it the 3 Ps in housing: production, preservation, protection.
I'm Fred Blackwell. I'm the CEO of the San Francisco Foundation, and I am one part of the three-headed monster that is going to try to wrestle this issue to the ground with you all.
CASA, the Committee to House the Bay Area, was convened by MTC. Members of the steering committee include elected officials from around the region, including the mayors of the region's 3 anchor cities: Ed Lee of San Francisco, Sam Liccardo of San Jose, and Libby Schaff of Oakland. It also includes representatives from organizations related to affordable housing development, business, environmental protection, equity advocacy, and labor. The technical committee is comprised of stakeholders representing small and large jurisdictions, housing and equity advocates, labor, businesses, affordable and market rate housing developers, financing institutions, foundations, public transit agencies, regional planning, lawyers, and home ownership interest.
I have never seen our market at such peril as it is today. The growth of technology, while it's been great, has created a void in abilities to create housing to go along with it. And the MTC combination with everybody in this room, I think, is our best avenue to try to fix those issues.
You know, the Bay Area has a lot of transportation problems, but we have a housing crisis. And in fact, the housing crisis is at such levels now that it is starting to be one of our bigger transportation problems.
Well, the problem of affordable housing in the Bay Area is daunting. You know, Eden, where I work, we manage 7,500 apartments here in the Bay Area, and we have more than 20,000 people on the waiting lists.
We are placing families all over the region, primarily as far as Sacramento.
I'm actually heartened because it's a room full of people who really care about the issue. I'm also excited because it's being convened by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and I think you can't look at housing without looking at transportation.
Nobody's ever looked at it from this broad a perspective. So my hope at the end of the day is that we reach consensus on some big picture responses that will really move the needle as far as housing affordability here in the Bay Area.
The committee will consider a wide range of ideas as it seeks agreement on solutions to the region's housing crisis.
There's federal funding that comes to MTC. What part of that federal funding that goes then to other localities could be conditioned upon actually producing some percentage of their affordable housing production targets that most of them are not meeting? It'll take voters in the Bay Area and elected officials being willing to give up some discretion over land use approvals, as well as providing the support, the direct funding support that Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo voters did this fall, which was terrific. So we need the rest of the Bay Area to follow suit. We're going to need several more $1 billion of funding.
We have an opportunity to move forward big solutions, particularly because we know that communities are hurting today. And we know that voters have just come forward to say that housing affordability is their number one concern.
CASA will develop a comprehensive regional housing implementation plan for the 9 Bay Area counties. The plan is expected to include innovative financing strategies, state and local legislation, and recommendations to address the current regulatory environment, with a final report slated for release in late 2018.
What I ask of you is the following. I just spent a week in Washington, D.C., and the word compromise does not exist. There are battles between both parties that are hard to imagine them reaching something in the middle. We need to compromise. Everyone in the room, no matter who you represent, needs to think about the greater good.
For more information, visit the CASA project page on MTC's website.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, we briefed you on this back in July, and it was still kind of churning around with the development of the CASA recommendations. And staff thinks that this is a good time to come back to you to tell you what's going on, because the CASA Steering Committee is about to release its recommendations, and those are going to go to MTC and ABAG probably near the end of the year. And then there's a plan in 2019 to develop legislative packages. They would go directly to Sacramento to get funding for new housing. There's a 2020 presidential election. In 2021, the Bay Region adopts its new Plan Bay Area and Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And then there's another election in 2022 for governor, the gubernatorial election. So this thing is moving along, and so we thought it'd be a good idea to keep you apprised of what they're talking about. And really, the goal is to build 80,000 houses by 2020, and that's the near-term goal. But in the long run, they really need to build 80,000 very low or affordable housing units, and the price tag on those right now is upwards of $500,000 a unit. So we're really talking about a pretty big chunk of change here that CASA would need to generate. It's about a $40 billion price tag to address this issue of affordable housing. And so what they've done fairly recently at the committee level is they have looked at different ways to levy funds. And those include fund sources such as property owners, a windfall tax, a parcel tax, a real estate transfer tax, a vacant home tax, a short-term rental tax. They've looked at developers, a commercial linkage fee or a flat fee. They've looked at employers, a per-head fee, a gross receipts tax fee, commuter VMT tax. They're looking at local governments, revenue sharing contributions, redevelopment revenue set-asides, public land set-asides, and they're also looking at the taxpayer, a half-cent sales tax or a full-cent sales tax for the region, or a general obligation bond. And they've kind of pressure tested all of these different approaches and to see how well they perform with regard to overlap with existing taxes, the stability of the future revenues, the kind of rate yields, whether it could be administered, whether the tax is progressive or regressive. And overall, all those approaches seem to pass muster. So they're going forward now with a package. They're actually looking at $800 million a year in new revenues, which would build about 1,600 units a year of low-income housing, and develop what they're calling a compact. And the compact is going to be released shortly, we believe. So, and the compact has a whole bunch of policies in it, and then also kind of the green light to go to Sacramento and explore these funding possibilities. And the policy elements include things such as emergency rent caps, right to legal counsel for eviction proceedings, amending state housing law to kind of enable the 3 Ps, strengthening the use of public land for housing, removing regulatory barriers to additional dwelling units and tiny homes, streamlining approvals, similar things. There are about 16 policy proposals that they're bringing. So this is an information sharing item, and the question really is, how do we keep the authority on board with this, and how do we, and when do we weigh in, if we weigh in at all? And we certainly want to keep our ABAG members and MTC commissioners apprised of this. They are attending all the meetings and seeing it happen. But that is the CASA initiative, and it's about to be released. And if you'd like to discuss this, we certainly can at this point. And then I'll talk about the housing incentive pool, which is another funding source.
Okay. We have at least Supervisor Mitchoff and And I'm sure by the end of the time, we will all do it. So let's start with Karen, go to Kevin, and then Dave, and, what's his name? Yeah, and then,
What's her name?
Janet, no, I can't remember, I could never remember names.
It's the day after the election you get to pass.
Okay, all right.
All
Janet,
right.
and then if any one of you misses something that I feel strongly about, I'll reserve my space for less. So Karen, please.
Thank you. I am one of two. Supervisor Anderson is the other representatives on the Association of Bay Area Governments. Martin and I also sit on the Regional Planning Committee. Dave, you're the mayor's conference person? Huh?
Yes.
Okay. I can tell you, and I'm sorry if I wasn't paying attention in July, but this is, the first I heard of this was by our county lobbyist the other day saying, are you hearing anything about this ABAG MTC housing thing? And I'm like, no. So again, my apologies if I missed this in July. We have an ABAG meeting next Thursday. This has not been presented to ABAG. I can assure you that there are members on ABAG who are going to fly through the roof when I hear the taxes that I want to know who they vetted this through, because I'm on my soapbox now, folks, but housing advocates, I almost said a bad word.
Yeah, temper yourself. We are being recorded.
Yes, I know. Housing advocates just think it's easy to solve this problem by forcing this down our throats. We at ABAG have consistently said that the major job centers need to start sharing the jobs out in our area rather than imposing all this housing on us for them to get the benefits in the cities. I was at Air Board this morning along with Mr. Hudson talking with the mayor of Palo Alto, and she said everyone in their city lost who was for any kind of housing. All the people that won were all no-growth advocates. I don't agree with that in the fact we have to find a balance, but this gentleman, Mr. Karuviubius or whatever, he's living in La La Land. If he thinks that those of us out here are willing, we're already going to have to give up control relative to development around BART stations. And in case you didn't know it, BART Director Josefowicz lost his race for supervisor in San Francisco County.
Inappropriate to cheer.
No, you can. Because he's the reason we have AB 2923. And I know Director Allen is in the audience, and I know she was not a fan of that bill. My point is, I think we need to be monitoring this. I know we're going to all speak. It's going to go to the authority next week. I can only imagine what our colleagues are going to have to say. I think Julie Pierce may have a little bit more balance to this, although she's not on CASA either. And I know we've been getting a number of briefings at ABAG, and I sit on a number of committees, and this is not one of them. We keep asking, when is CASA coming? What is CASA doing? Oh, we're going to bring you something. We're going to bring you something. Well, moving on to something else, we just are so thrilled that Prop 6 was defeated. And one of the major issues was we promised the public that those dollars would not be used for anything other than transportation. I know that there's probably some way that we can use these funds, but the public doesn't understand that. They're going to think we lied to them when they see or read that STIP money and TLC and STP money can be used to help fund housing. This is outrageous. And anybody who did a tax survey and found that there was going to be willingness to pay another half cent regionally to fund housing that they'll have no control over is we passed Measure R yesterday. They'll be smoking the marijuana that we're going to allow to be grown out in our agricultural areas. You can tell I am just speechless about this. I don't even know what we would say in a letter back, Martin. I think next week you will get additional comments, But the issue of giving up local control is really going to be a problem. I'm very concerned about that issue moving forward because it seems that the powers that be don't understand that those of us at the local level are having to deal with this, and they just think it's okay to dictate this from on high. And I don't know what the answer is, but putting this program in place as a regional, in 15 jurisdictions, let's all, I don't know who those 15 jurisdictions would be, but I heard you say something, Martin, and you didn't say it, but I think there is a fear that this would force jurisdictions that have adopted urban limit lines or growth boundaries to go outside of those in order to meet these requirements. And as much as the public in this area doesn't like traffic and doesn't like all the houses and thinks it's too crowded, we'll have a revolt on our hand, I think, if this kind of process goes through. I'm not saying that something doesn't have to be done and we don't have to find a way to do it. This is not, in my opinion, the vehicle, no pun intended, to do it.
Okay, take a deep breath, because you're going to go on for a while too, aren't you?
Oh, no, not me. I totally agree with Karen that, everything missed with building housing, there's all the ancillary things that come with housing, or need to be there for housing to succeed. We need Oakland, San Jose, and Silicon Valley, San Francisco, to, as Karen says, start pushing those jobs our ways. Get people off the roads. But some of those ancillary say, what do we need to do with schools, with fire departments, with police departments? You need to be able to provide those same services as your population grows. And right now, if we're dependent on paying for bonds to add more schools, I mean, we're at a tipping point here as with taxes as it is anyway, and going to the public asking for more, not only to build the housing they want to build, but to add to your police department. Right now in East Contra Costa County, with the fire department, we're covering 250 square miles with 3 engines. Adding more population out there, stacking them and packing them, going higher won't help us. There's not a ladder anywhere in East County. The ladder's got to come from Pittsburgh or Antioch. If we start going higher and more depth on that. But that's what concerns me the most in all of this stuff. There doesn't seem to be a vision beyond building more houses that needs to be in everything that we do out here. What other consequences? I call it California the land of unintended consequences. There's so many things that we pass and then slap ourselves in the forehead and go, gee, I didn't think of that. We don't want to go into this process with head-slapping motions afterwards, thinking, gee, who thought we'd need more schools? Who thought we'd need more police? Who thought we'd need fire department? Who thought we needed more of this? All we need is more housing. We all know there's a huge housing crisis going on, but there has to be a better effort other than taking local control, as said. That'll be difficult.
I think process elimination, I get to jump right up. Let me read a couple things and then try and do some relation. I started reading this thing and I thought I was working on a campaign, but this just desired effect. Create a new entity to be staffed by MTC/ABAG with capacity to accelerate housing production and fill gaps in the region's housing production. Anybody afraid? Disallow height and density reductions. On every page there's something. Subject to Housing and Accountability Act. I think I had to pull that thing and read it because I have a feeling there's something in there that might be a little bit scarier than what it sounds like. Developer incentives. Reverse redevelopment. Make SB 35 projects eligible for an automatic 35% density bonus. What was the last one I had on here? I'll leave it alone. I want to try and relate this to, since I've got 2 staff members here. It isn't just the number of houses you have to do. What is really disturbing to me is we had a general plan we turned over to the public. 32 people came together, made a very good general plan, total build out. I think at most the highest number I've seen is 1.24 to 1 jobs housing balance and 1 to 1 in the corridor. So we're doing this pretty well. Until I hear the number 500,000, which is a low number compared to what Newell was talking about, 500,000 per unit. Our very low income is 516 units. 516 units, and I think we've got 20. So when MTC writes the $250 million check, we can get close. This is 1 out of 101 cities. And we aren't kidding. We do know where the problems are. We have the map, and it shows who's doing it. Our area, we're about 5% off. Oakland, they'll hit their number in 2365. That was not a joke. They'll get to their number at the rate they're going in 2365. San Jose's not close, and I don't care what statistics San Francisco puts out. How long have we been in that building? 2 years, 3 years? I walked by, Salesforce was going up. There must be 15 buildings going up around there. It's okay to add 2, 3, 4 million square feet of commercial. And where's the housing that goes with that? Not only this is the worst part about it after sitting next to Scott Wiener. Not only aren't they doing a one-to-one jobs housing balance with what they're building, they're getting behind on what they're building, and they were way behind to begin with. And Sam Liccardo at National League of Cities is telling me we need to do 6 times the amount of housing that we have projected. They're that far behind. So you could pick 3 places, Santa Rosa by default, but I mean, that's a different story, of your largest cities in the Bay Area, and if they could just do one-to-one jobs housing balance from this point forward, I might actually not be upset. They can't do it. So no matter what we do, we're always going to be behind. We're always going to be losing. And here's San Mateo and Contra Costa, the 2 largest counties with cities, 19, 20 cities each. So each one of them is trying to pick up these little points. Well, Scott Wiener is telling us, I wish I could get the exact quote, we're never going to get caught up as long as we continue with this archaic way we do of land use planning through the cities.
Yeah, he said that at the...
I don't know where exactly to go with this, but I would like to see it kind of back through the RTPCs and their cities and get a letter together so that you've got an idea of what the direction should be. I can't imagine, as I'm looking at 2 of our planners, that they could be really happy with this. There's no way I can make the 516 number, let alone what are they going to do, make it 1516? I think that's where it was before, 1216. It's just fine. Don't give me any money because you found a way to cheat us out of something, and we know where it's going. It does make perfect sense because I'm beginning to understand how they do things, but this is not going to be a solution. Go get them, Lou.
No, I was going to check with Janet. Do you want to?
Thank you. Where's the best way to start? And I do think, starting out, being kind, that there is a need for more housing. I think we all would probably agree that that's a true statement. However, the idea that we play a game almost of those who do the most, are winners, and that means that to me, everyone else is a loser.
86 cities are losers.
Yeah, and I don't know how that encourages the 86 cities to do it, because they're going to be paying for the other cities, whatever it was they did. And it just doesn't seem like an effective way of getting at our end goal. I think we all agree that we need to build more housing, because at least like in my area, we know that we don't have enough housing for the number of people who want to live somewhere. And it's just the idea that a transportation agency which is, if I understand correctly, this is what is happening here, is in charge of who does what with housing, is very difficult for me to think of as a viable solution. So I would hope, especially after yesterday, where I think there were several issues on the ballot that brought home very well for us what the voters wanted. And I know that some of us here, including myself, probably worked really hard on some of those issues. And we're very happy with yesterday's result in that regard. I just don't think this is a good approach, and I'll almost leave it at that, because the idea that we're being told what to do, but we're being told what to do, but at the same time, the money to do it with is supposed to come from us in one form or another, and I think that's the underlying big picture problem that I have with this, and I don't think it will work. So I'll leave it at that.
I think if I could sum this up, I think we're being asked, I don't even think we're being asked, but we're being something to continue doing things the same way and expect a different result. Throw $500,000 a unit at it, and we'll get this, no problem. If you can't come up with a way to do what we need to do for far less than $500,000 each, then you don't have the solution. That's it, plain as. There isn't that much money to do it with all the other problems that we have to solve with the state. And taking it from transportation is just going to exacerbate the problem, because then the money that you supposedly got from this tax that you worked on is going to be rated.
Well, and I know Luella wants to speak, but there's two administrative issues here. ABAG meets next Thursday night, so I think we don't have to respond immediately, because I think there'll be some direction out of that. And also, as I'm sure you're all aware, MTC and ABAG, and I sit on the committee from ABAG, is going to be hiring a new executive director. And I don't think that's going to happen as quickly as everybody thinks it is, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mr. Heminger hangs on for a little bit longer than he has indicated. But I can guarantee you that these will be very specific questions as part of an interview process. We're going to be looking for somebody with new and creative ideas, and that isn't to criticize Mr. Heminger, but he's a transportation person, and as Dave quoted Mr. Wiener, and we saw Mr. Heminger on the thing, this has always been the tension between ABAG and MTC. And ABAG is supposed to be the leader in the, on housing and planning. And since the merger, it just doesn't feel that way. So I think when we report out next week, we can indicate our concerns. The full authority will indicate its concerns. We still won't have the information from the ABAG meeting on Thursday night, but then we're going to, and I know the regional planning committee meeting that would normally have been scheduled for the first Wednesday in December has now been rescheduled to January. Now I have an idea why that might be. Maybe I'm being too conspiratorial. But I just think we don't have to make a direct response, and depending, I think going out to RTPCs is fine, but I think we need a little bit, I think we can have better response based on other regions of the area, that it might be a little bit more coherent. And I don't want staff having to spend a lot of time if this gets changed dramatically. Unless you think, Mr. Engelman, it's not going to change dramatically. You don't sit on CASA as a technical staff person, do you?
No, I don't think CCTA is on CASA or on either the steering or the
no, and when
technical committee.
When it said there, I don't know who said it, that ABAG sits on CASA.
Yeah.
I think they may have one or two representatives, but it's mostly housing advocates and big city folks. Thank you.
Yeah. And the concern staff has at this point is they're releasing this thing called a compact. And so we would ask the question, compact with whom? Who is involved? And so it's already going to come out with that name, which implies we're all with it. And so the question to you is, what do you want to do when that thing gets released? It will get released, and it will have these ideas in it. I'm sure they're going to massage these ideas, but I don't know. I think the steering committee, I think CASA finishes its work, says here's our compact, and they release it, and then they march off to Sacramento to try and get the funding. And I do want to just make a clarification. There's another topic in here about the HIP program, the Housing Initiative Pilot Program, and that does include funding for $76 million, but that is for transportation projects, but it's going to the cities that produce the most housing.
Okay.
And originally it was the top 10 producers, and now it's the top 15. And so when you give that $76 million in transportation funding to the top 15 producers based upon the last 3 years, the big cities kind of walk off with most of the money. San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland get 40 million of that.
Well, and going
so
back
that thing is already passed. So that HIP program that went through, and Commissioner Pierce voted against it, but that went through the end of October. And these things are happening as well. This is transportation money, federal transportation money going into PDAs to build transportation projects that help incentivize housing development.
I can't believe that the compact that is being drafted will be able to be released without authority of ABAG and MTC. And I appreciate this presentation, because next week that will be one of my number one questions. And I already know who from another county is going to fight that vociferously, because she's been wanting to hear about this. So I don't know how they have the authority to go. Plus, I'm on the legislation committee, and it has to come through us if we're going to seek legislation through ABAG MTC. So I'm hoping there are a few little check stops before it marches on.
Okay, I see no other microphones on, so I'm just going to say that my reaction to all of this is it's impractical. It doesn't work in the market. We're going to either tax ourselves out of appreciation for people wanting to be here. We're already.
There'll be a lot of housing, because we'll all be.
Yeah, no, we're already seeing the exodus, and the more the exodus happens, the less we're going to need in housing. So it doesn't even work kind of economically when you step back. Local control is really important, not just because we're all just brilliant and know the exact right answer at every moment, but the taxes come locally. So if you're going to have them locally, then you ought to have some say in how they're doing. It doesn't address what the actual land available is. For example, the plot of land that we just were looking at for San Ramon, how much of that is not buildable? They just assume that because we don't have a house on a comfortably built area like San Francisco does, that we have somehow lost our minds and we're just hogging all the good stuff. It just doesn't fly. We have in Walnut Creek no real buildable land. We'd have to wipe out half of our single-family residences in order to acquire this. We're doing the very best we can, and we've just done a huge study about the cost of building and what all the fees are and how it is competitive and how you can expect any kind of low-income housing out of what comes, because it just doesn't even make sense for the developers to get involved in it. It just doesn't pencil out. Ergo, there we go back to this just doesn't make economic sense. Finally, I did point out that there were no schools in this, and I don't want to stop at that infrastructure. And I think you're going to have more police, more everything else. And where does that come from? More taxes. And how are you going to pile on? I mean, every time I look, it's a pile on, and eventually we're going to be paying more taxes than we have money coming in our front door. And the issue with the cities that meet production, that's really all well and good if you have the means and the opportunity to do that production. But there are places certainly in the peninsula and certainly out here where you cannot overbuild any more than we're trying to squeeze in and infill as much as we possibly can. And my final statement is, this is trying to change behavior with beatings instead of carrots. It just doesn't give anybody any enthusiasm about joining the Tea Party. Oh, that's a bad phrase. Joining any party, the housing party, there you go. That just doesn't give us any incentive to joining the housing party. And in the back of my mind, I can hear Carolyn Obringer saying that she is so jealous of Walnut Creek because we still have development and Concord can't get anybody to even pay attention to them to even start to meet their requirements as it is. They're anxious for more development and can't get the developers to do it. So this is all hijacked by good intentions, but I don't think it has any basis in reality.
Does that give you direction?
So just a question for the planning committee. So would you like this item on discussion or consent for the authority meeting?
Oh, we want big fat discussions.
Like discussion,
I think,
okay.
is that a fair assessment?
All right.
Well, yeah, I think Julie might have some additional perspective on this, and we can go from there. I do know that, or I believe, the housing advocates really have the ears of a lot of people up in Sacramento. And if we're going to fight this at some point, we're going to have to be ready for that because for some reason, as we all know, once they get to Sacramento, they forget their local roots. And so, Mr. Wiener grew, I don't know that he was born and raised in the city, but you made a comment about their land being flat and how they can build, but they can't even get building because there's houses that are old that people live in that are rent control. I mean, it's like that unintended consequences you were talking about. So
right, and one of the P's was preservation. Which how are you going to preserve it if you need to knock it down to
right? It's just we have to mandate it from the state level, and it will just happen because too bad for the people in the suburbs. So yes. Mr. Engelman, I think we do need to put it on discussion, and maybe we will all stay quiet since we've already had our say and listen to our colleagues, because I'm sure they will repeat some of the issues we've said but may have some new comments, and I'm sorry for staff because you're doing the best you can, and we don't want to not have a response, but at this point I think we need more input.
Is that sufficient for you?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I was just going to add a comment.
All right.
It would seem to me, this. I'm sorry. I was trying to be thoughtful. This is coming out of the 9 Bay Area counties, right? It's not the whole state that's producing this report, right? Right, so it's not that the whole state is doing this, it's that this region is doing it, and we're a part of that region, and we certainly actually did not have anything to do with this as far as I can see. And furthermore, we yesterday passed various measures and didn't pass various measures and so forth that indicate something about the housing and people's attitudes towards it in the Bay Area. And so I think that I don't think it's so simple as just if it goes to Sacramento, Sacramento that it will happen right now.
From you, I would hope that would be the case, but I don't trust it.
Well, I don't trust anyone probably either, but I think it is not as simple as they just take it and it's going to happen, is what I guess I'm saying. And so we may have more folks on our side than we think. We may already think we have a lot of people on our side. I actually do. But anyway,
Okay.
just a comment.
I like optimism. Is there any other parting words about this? All right, let's move. Oh, did anybody in the public want to talk about it? It would require a certain amount of bravery. Okay, all right, well, okay. All right, thank you. All right, we are moving, whether we want to or not, on to the next item, which is item 6.
May I ask, Madam Chair, this seems pretty straightforward, and this is in Janet's jurisdiction. Read the staff report. Would you be ready to make a motion?
Are you talking about item 7?
8.
We didn't do 7 yet, though. We have to do 7.
Oh,
We still got 7 in front
Oh,
of us.
I'm sorry. I thought it was the same thing. I'm so sorry. Never mind.
Okay, so now we're going to do, for hoots and giggles, item 7, and so who will take over for Brad?
So, Madam Chair, the item says Brad Beck. Brad Beck is on vacation, but I should also note he has announced his retirement effective December 28th. So he's coming back after Veterans Day, so he'll be back. But Matt Kelly will make the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair Haskew, and welcome to the housing portion of our agenda. This report is a little more based in reality because it is a report card on housing production. I'll keep this quick. It does kind of piggyback on Martin's item, but it's really just giving you an idea of how much housing has been produced here in Contra Costa and gets at the difficulty of that housing production. As you all know, representing your jurisdictions, you all must prepare a general plan under California state law, which must have a housing element. The housing element must identify the existing and future housing needs. It must have policies and financial plans that go along with that, and sites for that housing must be identified through zoning. Those existing and future needs are known as the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. It's prepared by ABAG every 8 years. We are now 4 years into the current cycle, and ABAG has worked with all the local jurisdictions in the Bay Area to come up with numbers of permits issued in each city through those first 4 years of the cycle. So there's a chart on page 7.2 that shows the allocations through RHNA by county. You will see that Contra Costa does have a lower allocation than its percentage share of population, where we have 15% of the region's share of population, but we only have 11% of the RHNA allocation. And basically, the RHNA allocation must match the land use pattern identified in the Regional Transportation Plan. So you'll see that the 3 big cities you talked about earlier are getting a higher percentage of the RHNA allocation, but that's where the jobs are.
Mr. Kelly, I'm going to,
Yeah.
I think we all, thank you for your work, but, Luella just stated right on point in the previous item, looking, staff seeks the authority's input on housing production issues and challenges. I think we just stated them.
You did.
So do you need more information from us?
I could
No.
provide 2 quick thoughts that would be that. Okay. One is that as a city that's got a lot of active permits for housing, it hasn't been built very much, and we think that there are a couple reasons for it. One reason is that the developers cannot get financing, and the other is the high cost of labor. And those are really big problems for the production of housing, and I'll leave it at that.
I'll add raw materials because the fires and the competition for the raw materials is extreme, and so everything is way more expensive than it used to be. So there you are.
I don't envy you having to deal with this. RENA is not fun, and I keep hearing at ABAG that they're going to change the way they do stuff. But you mentioned something right there. The permits are available, but we're not building, and so then we get criticized, we jurisdictions, when it's up to the developer. So it's sort of a conundrum, and Mr. Romick probably can state it better.
Well, I mean, I'm not in the same conundrum. We're building. As you notice, you read the report that we've met 66% of our allotment at right now, and Brentwood's at 163%, but the problem is Brentwood isn't building any affordable housing. And so they're looking really good on their RENA numbers, but I mean on the total numbers, but he went into low income and very low. I don't think they have any, or maybe just one unit. So I mean, so those numbers are somewhat miscued in the fact that although we are producing a lot of housing in East Contra Costa County, the same problem we all face is with everywhere, and that's generally because, like you say, it's a $500,000 a unit subsidy to build those types of housing, and there's nobody out there I know right now that's really eager to, even though we all have land zoned appropriately for those types of uses out there, there's nobody banging on our door anymore to build anymore. So beyond that, I mean, you know, I can speak for East County that, you know, for most of us out there, we're close to meeting our numbers, or we're more aggressive than that because we do have land to grow, and we are, quote, building the only affordable, quote, housing in the Bay Area probably.
No, we are.
Well, I mean, affordable in the house, price of a house. No, I'm not talking low, I'm just talking affordable in the sense that it's compared to what you're paying everything east of, west of Willow Pass. East County is for first-time home buyer is where you want to go and come to.
So you're asking for action. So do you feel you have enough information to be responsive about what we feel are the housing challenges facing Contra Costa County, whether it's Oakley or El Cerrito or, you know, downtown Walnut Creek? It's financing and getting it in order to. We need redevelopment 2.0. That's what we need.
Right. You know, and to kick on, the biggest problem I think everyone is having is just, you know, the fires and working with PG&E and all the utilities, because it takes forever to get PG&E involved with anything. And finding construction people anymore is getting tougher and tougher as a demand for workers. Yeah.
You know, I mean, that is a problem. But this whole issue with low and very low has been here for a while, way before the fires.
Oh, no, exactly.
So it's the ability to build at those levels when it's so expensive, and it just doesn't work. So,
right.
Thank you.
So is there anything specific you need?
Oh, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you for your feedback.
All right, and then now we are going to move on to item number 8, and since I'm willing to follow up on Supervisor Mitchoff's suggestion.
She was maybe suggesting that I might want to make a motion, and I am quite willing to do so. Sorry, thank you. My motion is simply to approve the item in 8.1, which is about the, trying to think the words here, okay. Resolution 18-65-G, which is an allocation of Measure J West County Ferry Service Program funds for fiscal year 2018-19.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimously.
And Mr. Beck is back? I'm joking.
Okay, that gets us to item 9, and that is for allocating one Bay Area OBAG to Safe Routes to School funding. And, oh, yeah, right, Brad should be here, right? Who's the Brad?
So I'll be the Brad tonight. So we did run into some extra funding here, $822,000 for Safe Routes to School. We've gone around to the various committees and asked how they want to allocate this. And the regional transportation committees and the tax and the task force have identified a process for allocating the funds, and we're recommending approval of that process, which is essentially the same process we've been using in the past for these kinds of funds.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. May we have the vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that means that it's another unanimous opportunity. And then we go to item 10, other business.
Say thank you for identifying additional funds for us. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, really good.
Good job.
Other business, is there any other business? Since everybody seems to be packing up, I'm thinking no. Does staff have any other business? Well, then, it is my pleasure to adjourn this meeting to the next meeting, which is on Wednesday, December 5th, 2018. Good night.
I'm going to be in Maui.
Yeah.
I turned off my microphone before I said
I know that. Good for you.
Anyway. Well, maybe not. I think we're leaving Thursday just because this is.
You'll be here next week.
Yes. And I think I made my husband made a reservation for Thursday, so then we wanted to go to this meeting.
Well, NACO, or National Association of Counties, has a legislative